If you finished Clair Obscur Expedition 33 and your mind is still spinning, you're not alone. In the spoiler-filled section, I'm going to walk through the major story beats, what I think they meant, and how it all hit me in the moment emotionally, especially by the final moments. This is where the philosophical core of the game really started to land for me, and by the end, yeah, it might have reshaped how I view the entire journey. So if you're looking for a breakdown and a personal take on what just happened, especially in relation to my review, check it out, link in the description. Now let's get into what is probably the most gripping narrative in a video game I've played in recent memory. First off, I want to talk briefly about these major story beats and how in the first few moments I'm heartbroken and thus locked into the story. I knew about the rough idea that the game had a character that wiped out a chunk of the population called the Paintress, but that was quite literally all I knew, except for one more thing. Somewhere in the range of 12 to 16 hours in, some large emotional beat happens that can easily be spoiled. This is the actual main reason I switched off of Oblivion so fast, and boy, that was the right decision. But what I didn't expect was to be floored immediately. Gustav is running through Lumiere, I'm getting accustomed to this world, wondering what the relationships are that these characters have, and then quickly learn of Gustav and Sophie's connection. The reason I think the next beat hit me so hard was that I was under the impression that Sophie and Gustav were the same age and that she was going to be the love interest of the game, along the lines of rekindling this love before the absolute doom of the next gommage. So when she got Thanos snapped, my little romantic heart shattered. Then when we make landfall and see Renoir for the first time and the hand monster, I am both deeply curious how Renoir is alive, but also very impressed by the monster design. Having the whole expedition basically wiped out immediately was another crazy start into this game, and I started to wonder what the potential twist that was coming could be. These starting events are the specific things I reference as a great hook in my review, but also such a wild start I just couldn't see coming. Eventually, we see some form of affinity between Maëlle and this curator character, and I start to assume her connection to this world, and I think this is the twist. I just couldn't place what she is to the story. At that same time, Gustav is my main. He seems at this point to be the main character, and as the only male character in the roster, he's my de facto character that I place my immersion into. Also, I would like to note, I didn't know anyone famous was in this game. I was convinced Gustav was either played by Robert Pattinson or he had heavily inspired the character's design. I had just seen Mickey 17, so it was fresh in my mind, but the Charlie Cox revelation makes me wonder why my recent Daredevil viewing didn't sign the alarms on it being distinctly his voice. So when, at the end of Act 1, where we find the demise of Gustav, I myself am hit with another level of grief. I was convinced at this point that there would be a redemption of Gustav and Sophie, and having the character that I was identifying as the role of me being wiped off the slate in Act 1 shook me, especially because he is set up as the faux protagonist thus far. To add to this, my girlfriend is playing through on her own game to the right of me. I was shook by this ending, and I waited 2 hours for her to catch up to even remotely vent both the grief, but also the excitement I had about what was to come. The writing was amazing, but I have a keen eye for foretelling what will happen in stories as they become formulaic when you've seen enough of them. So not being able to see this coming and having a burning curiosity was so exciting for me. Fortunately, we meet Verso, whom replaces Gustav, but he seems untrustworthy from the get-go and is obviously lying based on the glances we see as the audience. This is also where the world really opens up for me as I begin to explore more with Esquia's swimming capabilities, and I go into a lot of side content and lose a lot of fights, but I'm loving it. Eventually, I veer back into the battlefield area where we get the duelist, and I love the design of this character as I mentioned in the review, but I think I may have over-leveled a bit because of the side content and he wasn't that difficult, so I got through him unfortunately quick. The flame side boss in that same area was significantly harder for me due to its super speed dash. Then we meet my actual favorite party member, Minoko. I love the aspect that essentially now I'm a Pokemon trainer whom has to defeat every foe to unlock all these cool new abilities. My party at this point was Verso, my de facto character, Maëlle, the likely real protagonist of the narrative at this point, plus a major powerhouse, and Minoko, whom was my shield, bypass, break damage, and breaking king. I unfortunately had to bench Luna at this point, but I still love her, and I never gave CL a fair chance. Before I went to the Axon section, I did more extensive side content to fill up Minoko's Pokédex, and I stumbled across the Scavenger, which at this point was by far the toughest foe I had faced at this point, and it took me an hour plus to navigate successfully, many points in which I wanted to just stop. It could have been more, it was a long time, it was like 3 a.m. The Axons were a beautiful section to the game, but they may be the only part of the narrative that I am a little wishy-washy on their role in the world. If they are the real Renoir's creation, why don't they bombard the real paintress to get her out? And why does Renoir have us kill them to create the barrier breaker? If you got the lore for this one, I would love to have a better understanding of this, as I think I completely understand everything else about this world based on the side content I've played and seen others play through. At this point, I was pretty sure Alicia and Maëlle were either the same person or some form of the same person, as they looked, well, identical. Also, I wondered why all the main men in the game, Verso, Renoir, and even Gustave, look similar, so I was wondering if this was another case of multiple identities, but Renoir and Verso acknowledging they were father and son kind of shut that theory down. This was the tail end of Act 2, and I couldn't recall if Act 3 had already come at this point, and I somehow missed it. Then the reveal happens after we beat the paintress, which I thought was a great fight, by the way. I'm left wondering if the game is just going to end, and I'm going to have to look online for some deep artistic meaning to the story that I missed. But then Lumiere gets wiped, and I'm even more confused, but also relieved. My dumbass will get to know more and not be lost. Alicia's prologue into the Act 3 being Maëlle's act was a whole movie, but I am floored by all the reveals, knowing that I was somewhat right about Maëlle, but also how far off I also was continually giving a sense of satisfaction. The story wasn't doing something I was familiar with and was providing such a cool look into the world and narrative. I'm left still wondering how time works in the canvas, as everyone is experiencing time at an accelerated rate compared to the real world, since the parents were in there for like 50 plus canvas years before Maëlle was ever born. I will note at this point, knowing we had to battle Renoir a third time, technically it was like the fifth time, was kind of a drag, but the narrative surrounding real Renoir's reveal and his commitment to save his wife from trying to deal with her grief was a strong moment here, and was a notably distinct fight visually because of the perspective of the mother in the background and the axons. At this point, grief and loss has been present since the first 5 minutes of the story and has many layers at this point. So having this world be entirely an attempt to hold onto what was left of their dead son and brother further drives this emotional through line to its finality, and to what I mentioned is the biggest philosophical decision. Friends of mine, and most of the internet it seems, have sided with Verso as the choice. From a perspective of looking at this being a tale of grief, I think this is poised as the right decision. There's a small piece of Verso's soul that is infused with the canvas that is enslaved to continue painting with no breaks and no rest. The idea that they are hurting Verso so that they can continue feeling his presence and world is deeply disturbing, and is the source of why the Verso decision, I imagine, is the popular and narratively is what seems is the canon ending, assuming the series goes further to investigate this war with the writers. But I think Maëlle's side is also a just one when considering what a life is. You can argue that these people's existence isn't real but a simulation, but from the question of what makes life, is it intelligence, agency, maybe a soul, I would argue the inhabitants in this world have everything that would suggest a deeper look into what is a life. I think this is one of those train questions where there's like 5 folks tied to a rail that a train is barreling towards, but you have the option to defer the train to another track and only hit one whom is bound to that one. That one individual is one life, but technically they weren't on track towards death. You put them there to save the others. So what is the right choice? I'm not saying Maëlle's decision is the better one because you're saving thousands of quote-unquote lives versus the loss of Maëlle and the torture of Verso, but I think even with the dark context that Maëlle's decision has on this world with adult Verso also looking to be enslaved, I think it is a much harder decision than it may seem, and is why I'm left feeling conflicted on what is right. I think one can argue that the canvas could be a stand-in for addiction as a harmful coping mechanism like alcohol or drug abuse to numb the pain of the grief. This further pushes Verso's choice as the right one, but I just can't shake this loss of life that is involved in this choice. I am deeply intrigued to see where they could go with this universe, assuming a sequel of sorts is made, that is. Even if they don't, I am deeply happy with my time with this game and will continue pushing it forward for others to try out. The amount of side content that gives further context on the canvas, like Clea's relation to the Nevron, Simon, and even something as small as the connection that CL and SKA have and why that is. Super emotional aspects that are choice, but super worthwhile exploring. I even saw somewhere that Minoko is the family dog, and that is why he is set up as Verso's best friend. Speaking of, going back and playing or just watching the cutscenes is so worthwhile after seeing the reveal. Stuff like moments when Gustave gets killed, Maëlle is thrown into a middle universe of sorts where she can hear her real mother and real father arguing about why she was in here, or even moments as small as the group asking Minoko how long he had known Verso, and he responds, I feel like I've always known him, since he is Verso's creation. All the way up to the end of Act 2 has all of these moments that I think are super worthwhile and add a lot to the game. I think I've rambled enough, but I was excited about the story and wanted to mention it somewhere. As we head over this video, I ask you, what story aspects stuck out to you? Did you have a different perspective on the story's final decision? Who were your main 3? And did you also love Lune? Until the next one, my name is Easy Break, and I will see you in the next one. Toodaloo.
So, wait. SKA is that powerful?
Apparently so, but also lazy.